We'll start with you, but the recent tragedies, as he said, in El Paso and Dayton were the latest in a long series of mass shootings in America. Both of you oppose a ban on assault-style weapons and high-capacity magazines. Why shouldn't guns be part of the problem, part of the answer?
Well, what I've said is that we absolutely need to address the challenge of gun violence and the challenge with assault weapons at the same time that we maintain our Second Amendment rights. Have carried these weapons. I carried the military version of the AR-15 assault-style weapon for 4 years in the Marine Corps. I understand the seriousness that comes with handling firearms and the responsibility that comes with them, the safety that's needed. But I'm also a father of 4 little kids, and I'm a Christian. And every time one of these tragic shootings occurs, which are now all too frequent, my wife Laura and I are up late worried about the safety and the future of all of our kids. We absolutely can come together, Republicans and Democrats, and maintain our Second Amendment rights at the same time that we take common sense steps to reduce the gun violence in this country. The best way that I think we can do it, and this is something I've called for now for the 27 months that I've been campaigning in this district, is comprehensive background checks. When I went to buy a shotgun at Cabela's last year, former Marine, a law-abiding citizen, I went through a background check. But one of these crazy white nationalist guys can just roll up into a gun show right here in North Carolina and buy all the assault weapons they want and do terrible things with them. So if a law-abiding citizen goes through a background check, everyone should. This is something that 90% of Americans agree with and something that I think we could get done in the Congress. State Senator Bishop is blocking it. The problem is the career politicians beholden to the special interest. They won't do what's right for the safety of American families.
But why shouldn't guns be part of the solution? Why shouldn't a ban on assault weapons or high-capacity magazines be part of the solution?
Well, I think that the best way to handle assault weapons is through a comprehensive background check. We've also got to look at what we can get done right now. Washington's a very broken place. Just about nothing's getting done at all up there, and anything that's coming out of the House of Representatives right now is dead on arrival with Mitch McConnell. But what did President Trump say a few weeks ago? That he was open to background checks, that he was open to red flag laws, which is another important way to reduce gun violence. So I think we have to look at what can we get done right now in 2020, and I'm not interested in waiting 20 years to save lives of our children. I'm interested in getting something done
Mr. McCready,
next year.
thank you. Senator Bishop wants you to speak on this topic.
You know, Jim, I don't rule out the possibility that some form of weapon needs to be prohibited. I supported the president's administrative prohibition on bump stocks. So I think in every case, the question you have to, the analysis you have to follow is, first of all, begin with recognition that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental constitutional right listed in the Bill of Rights, and that you have to be mindful of people's due process in depriving them of weapons that they're entitled to constitutionally. Beyond that, anytime, I'm open to discussing every idea, but the question needs to be to what effect and what is the intended purpose and what is the anticipatable result. We have a bigger problem in the United States with respect to this incidence of mass shootings than guns. Guns have been prevalent in America. Someone took me to task for not saying this exactly right in an article in your paper. Guns have been prevalent in America for a long time. The level of incidence of mass shootings is a scourge that is new. Not to say that they never occurred. They've occurred back into the 60s, the Texas Tower shooting, but the incidence of them must change. And in order to understand that, it's important to recognize that something's going on besides just guns. Guns then could be part of the solution, Jim, but you have to address the other issues that are going on. I think it's a complicated social fabric, cultural change issue, and there's a lot of mental instability and mental health issues that need to be addressed as well. So I don't rule anything out, but you talk about the background check. Mr. McCready said somebody that's going to go to the gun show and buy a weapon in an interpersonal exchange is without a background check. It hasn't happened at all. Which mass shooting would that have stopped? I'm not saying I rule it out, but I think that's the analysis you need to get.
What about red flag laws? You referenced red flag laws. Polls show that a vast majority of Americans in both parties support them. Do you?
I think red flag laws are worthy of consideration. The key thing there is you must have two things to be concerned about. First of all, are people's due process rights completely and adequately protected so they're not being stripped of weapons without regard, without appropriate process to protect their constitutional right? And second of all, I have grave concern in administrative practice for whether liberal judges who have taken so much on themselves to carry out in terms of activism might use such a power to strip inordinate numbers of people of weapons. So you'd have to have an appropriate procedural device to have an outlet to protect against that. But I would consider that as a possibility and debate it. I think it should be debated.
Senator Bishop, thank you. Mr. McCready.
Well, we absolutely need red flag laws. I mean, there's a lot to be done to take on this challenge of gun violence. But I want to just come back to something State Senator Bishop said a moment ago, which is crazy. He said that comprehensive background checks wouldn't be effective. If he were to leave his closed-door fundraisers and the Raleigh legislature and get out with the people like I have, he would see that up to a third, at least a fifth, potentially as high as a third of all sales and transfers go without a background check. There's no reason to bring that kind of risk for our children.
Mr. Bishop, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, isn't it that one thing he could not answer is he could not identify any mass shooting that has resulted from someone acquiring a gun without a background check at a gun show. Again, I'm not saying that there may not be prophylactic reasons to go ahead and address that, but that is not the source of the problem. I think that's the key that I'm trying to get at, and I think what you're seeing is play in politics. The question is what can be done and what must be done to effectively address the problem that is occurring, a spate, a scourge of mass shootings in which people are being killed. That's got to stop, and it's not a question. I think easy answers, simplistic answers that won't solve the problem don't do anything other than add regulation and complicate people's frustration.
Senator Bishop, thank you. You have another follow-up, or are you good on that topic for now? Good. We're good on that topic. So let's move forward so we can get more topics here. From now on, gentlemen, if we can, let's try to limit our answers to 1 minute going forward, just so we can get some more of these topics in. They include important pocketbook issues like jobs, trade, taxes, and budget. We want to start with Christine.
Yeah, many North Carolinians, especially 9th District farmers, are feeling the effects of the trade war with China. How do you think the president is handling the dispute, and what would you do if you were in Congress?
Does that go to me?
Go ahead, Senator Bishop, yes.
Thank you. Well, you know, one thing that's interesting about that is I've spoken to the Farm Bureau group over in Union County and in Richmond County and in Scotland County, and guess who didn't come to any of those farm discussions with farmers? Dan McCready. The general impression that I get from farmers is twofold. One, you're right. They're being hurt by counter tariffs from China. And it's a very difficult thing for them because the farm economy is under pressure anyway. But they also have a fairly consistent response to me that they believe that President Trump's efforts to deal with the United States being on the wrong end, the receiving end of unfair trade must be addressed. So I think the answer is they support President Trump's policy of getting tough with China in particular, but they need for that policy to be brought to fruition and a successful conclusion relatively soon.
Senator Bishop, thank you. Mr. McCready.
Well, I agree with the president's starting the conversation to stand up to China. I agree with the president's push to stand up to China because the fact is China has not followed the deal that was made back in the 90s. They have been taking advantage of American workers. They've been taking advantage of American small businesses. And there's been no place that suffered more than these counties east of Charlotte that have been absolutely devastated by the trade deals out of Washington and China's unfair subsidies. Look at places like Robeson County and Scotland County, where around 40% of the children are living in poverty. This has a lot to do with the failed trade policies out of Washington. But where I differ from the current approach is I do not think that tariffs should be the primary tool to address Chinese trade practices. I think that we need to use all of our power as the United States of America, our economic power, our soft power, our work with our allies, all of our power, to have a comprehensive strategy to take on China and to level the playing field so that our farmers and our people of rural North Carolina can get a fair share finally.
Mr. McCready,
could I add one further point on that?
Quickly.
You know, Christine, one thing that needs to happen along the lines I just said is this needs to be resolved speedily. One thing that would help is if Dan McCready would get Nancy Pelosi to schedule a vote on the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that the president successfully negotiated with Mexico and Canada to replace or modify NAFTA. That's waiting for action by the Congress. And the House of Representatives, in the hands of Dan McCready's allies, won't schedule it for a vote. That's exactly the kind of playing politics that shouldn't occur.
Senator Bishop, thank you. Christine.
I just want to follow up because farmers may continue to support the president. The president has talked about maybe a bailout helping some of them, but it has been reported too that farmers just want the market back to where it was. So if you are elected, what will you do in Congress to get the market back for these farmers so they won't continue to suffer?
Well, one answer would be, and particularly if Republicans can gain control, we'll speedily implement USMCA. That'll help. And the other thing would be to make sure the president is hearing from us about what we're hearing from farmers. And that is, but he's sensitive to it. He's spoken to it very recently. There needs to be a rapid completion of the process of negotiating with China so that the market can come back to normal.
Senator, thank you. Mr. McCready.
Well, I'll just use this moment to point out that the challenges with China and the unfair trade practices, as bad as they are not the only source of the struggles in rural North Carolina. Another major source of struggle is our schools. And State Senator Bishop's war on our teacher pay is really, really harming thousands and thousands of people in this district. I was with a substitute teacher, Lucille, on one of our town halls in Robeson County recently. She told me that she's started off 10 years ago substitute teaching. She made $14 an hour. Today she makes $10. A decade ago, more than a decade ago, she was making $14 an hour, and today she makes $10. This is because of State Senator Bishop and his allies in the legislature who have left our teacher pay more than almost $10,000 less than the national average. A big challenge in rural North Carolina is a skilled workforce, is training and jobs, and we have got to be investing in our public schools alongside taking on China to make life better for so many people.
Mr. McCready, thank you.
Since you allowed him to go off on another topic, I need an opportunity to rebut
Real
that.
quickly, please.
Because it seems like he might be living on a different planet. You know, there's a difference in this campaign. One of the big differences between us is you get a bunch of promises from Dan McCready. From me, you get a record of legislative accomplishment. He just said something about my having a war on public schools. Let me make sure everyone understands. I have voted for and successfully passed into law 5 consecutive annual teacher pay increases in our budget. And if the governor, your ally, hadn't vetoed the budget we just passed, there would be annual increases 6 and 7. That's bipartisan accomplishment.
Senator Bishop, thank you. I'm going to have to pause right here, folks. We got to take a quick commercial break. Much more to come here during our debate, including these two candidates who will get to ask a question of each other. Keep it right here.